Hi Peter, thanks for replying to my video. I apologize for the confusion. So I want to start this one by first pointing out things that I think we could agree on. Yes, culture and genetics are entirely different. I am aware of that. I hope that wasn't implied or inferred in my video that I was confusing those two. In fact, that was part of my criticism. I believe Diamond was attributing too much or entirely the success and failure of civilizations on environment and nurture and culture and luck. And I think he was completely ignoring the possibility that genetics may play a role. Your last point, I agree. Yes, I would say that people exploited in a civilized society are somewhat dumber than people who do the exploiting. Even though, yes, the rich do get richer and the poor do get poorer in a capitalist society. That is very true. But I think at some point you have to admit that some people are just dumb at math or dumb at survival. And some people just don't know how to look out for themselves. And if you don't call that dumb, I don't know what is. If the word dumb has to mean anything at all, I would like to know what you're talking about. If you want to say that the words superior, inferior, dumb, smart don't mean anything, fine. But if it has to mean anything at all, I would like to know what you would consider to be a way to measure what is smart or stupid. Sure, you could disagree with IQ tests. Sure, you could disagree with using school grades. Sure, you could disagree with whether you could trick somebody in an argument. But if there is any measure at all, I think you would have a result. So if you want to completely avoid having to compare intelligence in any way at all, fine. But whatever standard you're going to use, you're going to have a result. And you're going to have a result on a person-to-person level. You're going to have it on a population-to-population level. Maybe it's genetic, maybe it's cultural. I'm willing to consider both. And that's my criticism to Diamond, is that I think he completely ignores the possibility that it could be somewhat genetic. You brought up an interesting point that if somebody wanted to answer a genetic question, he should do a DNA test. I agree with you in principle. However, when you think about it, it's not always practical. I mean, this is no excuse to not do it. I'm just saying, when people bring up the question, well, is alcoholism or homosexuality genetic? They're not necessarily saying we identified the alcoholic gene or the gay gene. What they're really saying is that nurture is inadequate to account for this, and therefore we attribute what is unable to be accounted for in nurture to nature or genetics. That's basically the sad false dichotomy. Right now, today, we have epigenetics and some other gray areas, but sometimes when people don't think in additional options, that's kind of what they're left with. And I'm not saying that that's a good dichotomy. I'm saying that's kind of the reality of how people look at things. I don't disagree that culture is Lamarckian. I completely agree. I don't think anybody argues that. And we agree technology does prolong life, and I think that is a good argument for why a civilized society is generally more preferable to live in compared to a hunter-gatherer society, almost just based on the factor of necessary labor alone. You do have a point that in a hunter-gatherer society, it's more equitable, but it comes at a price. I don't believe that in a hunter-gatherer society, freeloading is tolerated. In a capitalist society or an industrialized society, freeloading, exploitation, choice comes into a play a lot more. For better or worse, I don't know which one you value, but the options are much more available. And of course, when you measure the disparity and inequality in an industrialized society, it's usually amongst a greater population. When you talk about an equitable hunter-gatherer society, they are generally more family and tribe oriented. They're small communities. That's probably how they manage to keep the hierarchy in its order. Lastly, I don't agree that even if I did believe that one population is superior to another by any stretch of the word, by any definition, any aspect, even if you were to convince me that one population is superior to another population in many or all aspects that I could think of, I still don't believe that that would give them moral justification to do anything to the other population, aside from the obvious might makes right, which applies to everybody. It really just comes down to, how do you define superiority? I don't have a good definition, especially when it comes to populations, comparing populations to another population, comparing populations amongst each other. I don't have a good definition of superiority.